This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
All righty, welcome to episode 104 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we were joined by a former NBA player and now longtime NBA analyst for ESPN, Tim Legler. We wanted to have Tim on to kind of put a bow on the NBA season and start talking about the offseason. And with some of the recent NBA news this week, the timing of getting to have Tim on was great. We got to talk about Tim's grind to the NBA as a player, and how he thinks he would have fit in today's NBA, especially as a three-point shooter. We discussed how Tim decided to get into broadcasting at ESPN and what he thinks of the way the NBA is covered today. And then we also got into some of the offseason headlines, including Damian Lillard just getting waived by the Milwaukee Bucks, and then LeBron James' future with the Los Angeles Lakers. I know we've done a lot of NBA in recent weeks with Jay Billis on this podcast, Noah Eagle. We even talked a lot of NBA and about Michael Jordan with Mike Greenberg before that. But this was a really fun conversation with Tim Legler. As always, make sure you rate and subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page, and enjoy this week's episode of the Awful Announcing Podcast with guest Tim Legler. All right, he is a former NBA player. He was one of the best three-point shooters of his era, and now he is one of the best NBA analysts of this era. He's been with ESPN for a quarter century, just signed a new contract last fall. He is Tim Legler. Tim, thanks so much for coming on the Awful Announcing Podcast today. Tuesday, the first full day of free agency. As you go on ESPN to talk about players switching teams and signing new contracts, what would today's market be for a 29, 30-year-old Tim Legler?
That's a great question. I mean, I think for me, the one that is always going to stand out to me was the 5 years, $90 million that Duncan Robinson got, right? A few years ago. And actually, it's so good for Duncan Robinson now. He actually turned down $20 million in the last year of the deal, right? Because he thinks he can maybe get more, or they're going to, give him a deal. He's going to stay in Miami or leave. I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but I remember when that deal was signed. And look, he's a very, very good player. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big Duncan Robinson fan. Obviously, I was a shooter. I know what it feels like, but it shows you a lot about how not only the dollars have changed, but I just think the value on that particular skill, how much that has changed, because now, the green light is greener than it's ever been for shooters. So the volume is significantly higher, and there really isn't such thing as a bad shot for a guy like Duncan Robinson. I never played with that sort of freedom mentally. You processed good shots differently. As a result, the volume was a lot lower, and the money just wasn't there to be had for guys that was their primary role, was to space the floor and take and make three-point shots. That's kind of who Duncan Robinson is, and he turned that into 5 years, $90 million. So yes, I do occasionally have my mind wander to what it would have been like to have my particular skill set in the modern game.
Yeah, because obviously every team values the three-point shot more today than they did 25, 30 years ago. So do you think you could average 15, 20 points a game in today's NBA if you were playing today?
Yeah, I think probably 15 would be realistic. I mean, I think, I was right around, 9, 10 points a game. It was like my best year, because I was only taking, I led the league in 3-point shooting, and I was taking 4 a game. I mean, it was just a totally, now guys get up 5 1/4, so just the way that it has been embraced with the volume alone, there's no question in my mind that I could have been able to do that. And I just think also the way that you were coveted by teams now that want to play that style. And if you do it at a high rate, it sets you apart, because there's more guys than ever shooting the three in the league. And I think the skill level overall is greater than it's ever been in this league with shot making, but still guys that shoot that shot at a high percentage. And by that, I'm talking anything for me. That's anything you get up 43, 44, 45%, like north of that. I think you're setting yourself apart, and I was obviously able to do that over 50 a couple of times. What would that be worth to a team like on a free agent market if you were a shooter coming off a year in which you shot 52 from the three? I think I think it would be a good number.
You went to a small school, LaSalle. You went undrafted. Did you go into that draft thinking that you might get picked? Like, was being undrafted a surprise?
I definitely knew I was in consideration, and it was going to be probably the second half of the third round, I believe it was, or I think it shrunk to 3 rounds that year. It might have been 2. I don't remember.
Yeah,
exactly,
I think it was 3 rounds that year, and it was 7 the year before.
Okay, yeah. So it went from 7 to 3, and I was told by teams there was a good chance in the second half of the third round, and I didn't have some big party set up. I was kind of going into it pessimistically, like I don't want to be, embarrassed if it doesn't happen. I got this group of people around me, so I remember just watching the draft by myself on campus at LaSalle. And it didn't happen. And there's no doubt it was deflating. It was tough. But I will tell you, within a couple of hours of the draft ending, my agent had already taken a handful of calls from teams that didn't have a pick in that range and were interested in me coming into camp as an undrafted free agent. And in some ways, I remember the approach my agent told me was, if you were going to be picked there, you were better off not getting picked, because at that time, there was going to be no money coming your way at all, but you were going to be locked into a team. Like, you had to go to that team's training camp, where if you're an undrafted free agent, you can kind of look around at what might be a better opportunity to make a team. So that was kind of the positivity we spun on it. And that's really the approach I took going into that summer. It didn't happen, but now I've got to just go find a different way to get there.
And then what was that grind of getting there like? Like, what year did you sign your first guaranteed NBA contract for a full season?
It would have been in Dallas, and it would have been the 93-94 season. So what really happened was I had some 10-day contracts. Well, first it was obviously, different leagues. The CBA, the World Basketball League was first, and that was a 6'4" and under league. I was in Youngstown, Ohio. That was the very first time I ever got paid to play basketball, was that summer after graduation from LaSalle. Played in that. Of course, you're always going to the Pro Summer League, which was out in LA at the time. It's now in Vegas. You'd go and you'd play with a team. You'd hope to get invited back to camp. I went that route a couple of times, and then was in the CBA, and I was putting up big numbers in the CBA. Got some 10-day contracts. At the end of the second 10-day, they make a decision, keep you for the rest of the year, send you back. So I had 3 different situations where I had 2 10-days. And in every case, it's because there were injuries. And then guys were coming back. And a couple of those teams were really good teams. Utah and Phoenix were like dominant teams. So they had good guys coming back. They were really good teams. And so I went to go back to the CBA. I banged my head against that wall there for a few years. Finally, I went to France in 91, and I played a year in Limoges. And that was a good thing for me, because it put money in my bank account and it bought me more time. And it was after that when I came back and playing against grown men in Europe and just the feel of that. It was the first time I started to really think like I was really going to make this happen for sure. I just had to catch the right break. And I finally did that when Dallas called me up, and I believe it was 92, 93. So the second half of that season, I got called up by the Mavericks, and they told me from the beginning they were going to keep me for the whole year. There was 30-something games left in the season, and they signed me. And they said, we got to find out if you could sink or swim in this league. You haven't been given the opportunity. We're running you out there every night and see what happens. I played well, and then that led to that next year being fully guaranteed. I was on the roster the whole year. But that was like the first time with real stable footing in the NBA.
Yeah, so I think like we can sit here and say, hey, you're getting paid to play basketball. That's a great gig. But realistically, what that that bouncing around doesn't sound like a great life. Like, even if you are getting paid for basketball, like how mentally exhausting and draining is it living off those 10-day contracts and bouncing around between not just teams but leagues, not knowing necessarily where you're even going to be living month to month for that many years?
There's this dual component to it. Part of it is, number one, you love the game and you're competitive and you're just playing. You're playing games every night against good players, and so there's that, right? You just love to play. And in my situation, when I was in the CBA, I was in a situation where it felt like family. We had great ownership. It was unlike they had a salary cap. So like the owner in Omaha, Nebraska, he was very generous to the players. So it was a pretty good setup. You got your own apartment paid for by them. The coach became one of my really closest friends in the game. This guy named Mike Tebow, who actually went on to coach for years in the WNBA. He won a title as the head coach with the Washington Mystics a few years ago. His daughter, Carly, who was a little girl at the time. She's now the head coach at Fairfield. She has completely transformed their program. They won like 30 games last year in her first year as a head coach at Fairfield. Eric Tebow, the son, he was a little boy when I was there. He was a head coach in Washington after Mike left the Mystics. He's now an assistant coach in Minnesota. So it was this incredible family, the wife, Nancy, very good friends with them. So that was fun, right? Being a part of that close relationships. But the other component was like just knowing you were good enough, but not knowing how long this was going to take. And was it ever going to happen? Yeah. Because there were some nights you'd go and I'd drop 35 in a CBA game and you weren't even sure anybody even saw it. You know, like there was no scouts here tonight. It wasn't the era we live in now where everything is streamed. So it's easier for scouts to see guys. Then they had to be in the building. Like they had to be there and you had to see them. You had to know they were coming. A lot of times you would get a heads up. Hey, the Hawks are coming to see you tonight or whoever. And you get super dialed up, man. This adrenaline rush that night because this could be your big break. And so that part of it, man, not knowing what was the end game. Yep. Where is this going to end up? That was the hardest part of it. And I saw a lot of guys either resign themselves to being in the CBA forever and they just gave up trying to get there. Guys quit the game altogether. And I saw some guys get called up and make it and stuck. And those were kind of my inspiration. Like that's going to happen to me too. And so it was a lot going on at that time, man. I can tell you there's nothing I've ever done in my life that required more perseverance than those first 4 to 5 years out of LaSalle when I was struggling to get to the league.
Does that grind make you more mentally tough and competitive as a person, or do you already have to be mentally tough and competitive to just enter that grind?
Well, I think it's innate. I think you have to have it in the first place to want to go that road, right? And particularly, like I prided myself in academics. I was a first-team academic All-American at LaSalle. I had really good opportunities coming my way if I chose to go that route in the white-collar world, coming out of a business school with those academic credentials. Like that was there for me if I wanted to go that route. So just to choose this route, knowing how hard that was going to be, you already have to have some of it, but there is no question about it. It completely transformed who I was as a young man. And I think kind of really built me into the person that I am today was my just refusal to accept no for an answer when it came to chasing one of my dreams. And I think it's been lessons that I've passed on to kids I've coached. My AAU team, I coached all those kids for years. My own son was on that team. My campers that come to my camp every year, even now, my own children, like just in life in general, what it takes and the toughness you have to have and the relentlessness to ultimately overcome it. Yes, definitely. It formed a large part of what I am today as a person.
What were some of those other opportunities? Like what else interested you? What do you think you would have been doing if you didn't get signed to an NBA roster?
There were two things that fascinated me, and actually one of them I almost revisited after a couple years in the CBA and getting sent back after some 10 days. I started to wonder if it was going to happen. So the first was right away, like about the second half of my senior year at LaSalle, I was nominated for Rhodes Scholarship, and like that led to opportunities. And there were certain people coming to me in Philadelphia, and I think I would have probably ended up on Wall Street. That's probably was choice number one.
Yeah.
And then the other one was always law school, was always in the back of my mind. And I remember after like my second year out of school, when again, I didn't know if it was going to happen or not. I actually went back and I was very close to like applying and getting into it, hopefully going down that path at Villanova Law School in Philly. Like that was right there, man, on the tip of my tongue. Like, you know what? F it. I'm doing it. This isn't going to happen. I was very close at one point to doing that. And I just love basketball too much, man. I just love competition too much. And that's probably the main reason I did it. And I think that one thing that definitely, absolutely, maybe the single biggest contributing factor to me eventually making it was going overseas, because I went over for half a season. I was in the CBA. I got a call from a team in France, the number one team in France, Limoges at the time. And they wanted to replace this guy that was on the roster. They didn't tell me who it was. I knew he was a former NBA player. and he was on their team, and they were having some problems with the guy because he got hurt, and he didn't want their doctors like operating on him. He wanted to go back to the States. And so this whole drawn out thing happened where they basically said, we're not paying you anymore. We're going to replace you. That's when I got the call. And the reason I say it may be the biggest single factor is because of the money. I mean, I was broke. You're not making any money in the CBA. You're broke. And so it's like, man, that's a good chunk of change for like 4 months work at the end of the year. It'll buy me more time to make it to the league. And that's really what that was about for me. And I went over there and I walked into the apartment the first day that I was supposed to be living in. And that NBA player was still sitting on the sofa in that apartment when I walked in. And his name is Kelly Tripucka.
Oh,
and
wow.
He was sitting right there. And of course I walked in and knew him immediately.
Yeah.
And I was like, he looked at me and he goes, can I help you? I was with the translator from the team who drove me over there. I said, I was just told I'm coming in here to replace somebody. I knew nothing about who it was or anything else. And he basically said, well, that's interesting. Can you do me a favor? Can you just stay in a hotel for the night and let me sort this out? And I was like, sure. So the translators took me. I stayed in a hotel, and he was out of there the next day. And I went and had my first practice with the team. And after practice, I went and moved into that apartment.
So you fight all these years to get an NBA contract. Then you finally prove that you belong in the NBA, and then it's your knee that prevents you from having a long career. How frustrating was that?
Killer. I mean, to this day, honestly, I don't think I'm still fully emotionally over it, because I think about what I fought through, what I overcame. And now here I am. I've had now some good years I've strung together, but then it all came together in 95, 96 in Washington. Best year of my career. Led the league in three-point shooting, won the three-point shootout All-Star weekend. And here I was, like game 80, something like that, right at the end of the year. And I had a bad plant against the Boston Celtics driving to the rim, and I blew my knee out completely, 3 ligaments. At the same time, I dislocated my kneecap. I had damage to my quad muscle. It was almost like an explosion in my knee. And I was 29 years old. And what I had done that year, I felt like I could have done another 6 or 7 years in the NBA with that type of game. And I wasn't able to, man, because I rushed back too fast. I was back playing in like 9 months. They told me it was a year to 15 months probably, and miss all of the next season. I didn't. I came back actually at All-Star break. I got cleared to play. So think about how fast that was. This was late April. I heard it. I'm back playing in February. It was crazy. But I was blowing through every metric with the strength tests and everything else. They thought I was ready. I came back within a matter of a few games. I tore meniscus, shut it down for the rest of the year. And then it was just one scope after another, constantly cleaning it up. I played 4 more years in the NBA, and I never felt close to the same player.
So was that part of like, were you pushing to get back early, or like was the team pushing you to get back?
No, it was me. And I think what it was my mentality, because of what I had gone through to get there. I was not going to let anybody take my job. And that's just, it's crazy to think, right? Like, because I remember that year in Washington, I signed a contract that basically was a 2-year guarantee, but I could double my salary for the second year if I met like 4 specific statistical measures, and I smoked all of them. So now here I was. The second year was fully guaranteed already at double the amount I signed for because of these incentives, but I just blew my knee out.
Yeah.
So now I'm going into that summer, and they actually had to. It was an option on their part to pick that up. They did it when I was hurt, knowing it wouldn't maybe get me all year. But my mentality was, I'm not going to be sitting on the sideline while they go find some guy to replace me that they like even more. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to get back as fast as I can. So I treated that 6 days a week like a full 9-to-5 job. That's how much I was living at the rehab facility. And they were just blown away by how fast I was hitting certain benchmarks and looked like I was ready to go. I put a big heavy brace on. I felt great. I played really well those first couple of games off the bench. Got a big standing ovation the first time I checked into the game that next year in Washington. I'll never forget that. It was against the Knicks, and I played really well. And then within a couple of games, I started having problems, and I don't think I ever recall playing another game that I felt normal. that it was pain-free or had no swelling or limitations. It just changed the entire course of my career. And it was hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that how this was what was waiting for me at the end of this journey when I finally got to where I wanted to be. And like I said, I think I had another 6-7 years probably doing it at that level.
What do you think of the NBA's emphasis on the 3-point shot today? Like, do you think, is it good for the game, or has it gone a little bit too far?
I think it's twofold. I do think there's more guys that are highly skilled than ever, but I also think there are some nights I'm watching the game or calling the game, and I think to myself, man, that stretch of a game, whatever it may be, was a little bit monotonous, and too many guys with total green light. I think that's, to me, the one thing I would change a little bit, just a little bit more selectivity on the part of like coaching staffs and analytics guys of who is allowed to take that shot and when. That is the one thing about it to me. I scratch my head sometimes because they're not all good shots, obviously, when you're taking that many. So I think the emphasis more on shot quality, I wish that was a little bit better. But I also, look, man, I was a shooter. I embrace guys doing it. And when it's done at a high level, it's pretty awe-inspiring when you see teams that really string together 3-point shots, the way they can just go on runs and separate from teams. So there is a fun component to it. But I also think sometimes it gets a little bit too one-dimensional, what we're watching offensively.
How does the physicality of the 90s NBA that you played in compare to what it is today?
I mean, I don't think there's really any comparison. Just one, off the ball, what you had to deal with. I would jokingly refer to it as hand-to-hand combat to get a guy off of you so you could come off a down screen or you could run from one spot to the next. And like the number of times I was just like jogging through the lane when a play set was called and I'm just running to my spot to like start the play. And, you're catching an elbow to the chest or like, I remember one time specifically got drilled in the Adam's apple. I was literally jogging through the lane and I wasn't paying attention. And I just, boom, you just catch one of those because there was 2 refs on the court early in my career, 3 later, but there's no review. They weren't going to check it out and see what happened. Nobody caught it. So it was good. And guys knew that. So off the ball was higher level physicality, on the ball with hand checking and ability to manipulate guys with your strength, which I needed. I wasn't as quick as some of the guys I played against. So I used my strength as an advantage defensively to help me control guys a little bit better. So there was that. And then I just think also the component of getting laid out on drives and being in the air and getting laid out. And that level of contact at the rim, when you finally go through all the other stuff and you're there now. And I think a lot of it was because guys weren't really getting suspended very much. They weren't really, it was nothing more than a 2-shot foul. And so you were going to pay a price trying to finish that play. So I think for all of those reasons, I think the 90s was a lot more physical in what defenses were allowed to get away with than what we see today. Although I will say there was a dramatic uptick in the games I called in the postseason this year as opposed to the regular season. It was a dramatic difference in the amount of physicality. That looked to me more like the 90s, what I was seeing in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a Knicks fan, and especially those Knicks Pistons games, for sure. Some of those were absolutely a bit of a throwback. How did you get to ESPN? Like, did you envision a career in media?
I really didn't. I did some stuff when I was a player. I was always, the local beat writers on teams I played for felt like I, typically would have something hopefully good to say, and they'd come to me a lot. But then some of the stuff I did in Washington started really with when I hurt my knee and I wasn't traveling with the team. Tony Kornheiser, who was doing local radio in Washington at the time, and still is, he would have me on his show quite a bit. I even hosted his show a couple of times, and that's kind of started it a little bit. I did George Michael Sports Machine, which was a big show in the DC area at the time. But again, no interest in doing that. I think what triggered it for me was I got out of the NBA and the first thing I did, I had a couple years coming of salary because I retired due to my knee. I went back to business school and I went and got my MBA from Wharton. And I bit off a lot. It was a 2-year executive program at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. And I did it. I completed it. But when I got out, I was kind of like worried about like, what is this going to lead to? I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. I thought about being an entrepreneur and maybe joining up with some guys at Wharton. And as I was mulling that, I got a call from Rick Bucher, who was a beat writer on teams I played for in both the Warriors and Washington. And he called me up and said, hey, man, I got this producer at ESPN. He was writing for ESPN, the magazine at the time. And he said, there's this guy, Barry Sachs, a producer, and he wants to know if you're interested in doing any TV work. And here's his number. And if you're interested, maybe for an audition, here you go. That was what started it. That was the summer of 2002. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'll give this guy a call. And the rest is history. That's how it all began. I went up there, did my audition. I didn't know if they liked me. I didn't know if I would like doing the work. Turns out, I think both things were in the affirmative. They were answered, and the rest is history.
How do you think you've progressed as a TV analyst over the last 25 years?
I think I've obviously you get better every year. And I think that my versatility now is kind of what I'm proud of. The fact that over the years, all of the different formats they've given me, doing pre-game studio, post-game studio, those are two totally different animals. First of all, calling games on radio, doing a lot of radio analysis, which again is different than anything you do on TV. Going on debate-driven shows like Your First Take, or to some regards, Get Up. Being able to hold my own in that realm, and then obviously calling games, which I have done a number of over the years. At one point years ago, I had it was the only time I was a regular game analyst. I was doing Sunday night games on ESPN with John Saunders and Greg Anthony. We did a whole season together, maybe 15, 16 games, something like that. That was a long time ago. Other than that, it's been a lot of studio, and every now and then sprinkle a game in, sprinkle a couple of radio games in, until this past season when my contract was up and I was redoing my deal with them and getting a new deal. And the conversation came up, like, what do I want to do? Like, what do you want to do? I said, I would love to be a full-time game analyst and just put me on the regular rotation with, and they did that. And I absolutely loved it. It was probably the most fun year I've had at ESPN of all of the years, was probably this year, because I love the adrenaline and the live action in the moment teaching that it allows you to do.
Do you like doing the debate shows like First Take? Like you were doing that as far back as when it was Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless too.
Oh yeah, that's right. I was. Yeah, they're fun. They're fun. I mean, it's you never know what you're going to get some days and where the topics could take you, right? So you're like, and because at the same time, then you have to also go on to like post-game analysis and break down players and coaches that we're talking about potentially in a debate show. So it can be something like a delicate balance, but yeah, it's fun. And I've known and been friends with Stephen A. Smith for a really long time. So we've always had good chemistry and there's a lot of respect there. So that's always been fun for me to do those shows as well.
Do you prefer doing studio or game analysts? Like, do you have one that you like better? I mean, obviously they're very, very different.
Game analyst for me, I think, is kind of where I'm at now. I just love the fact that, because I always look at myself as a guy that sees the game sort of like a coach would. I've always been that way. I think I'm able to see 10 players at the same time. So you can see things that are important that might not catch the naked eye of a fan watching the game that I know mattered. And I want to talk about that. So I get to do it both of those realms. Post-game studio breakdown, obviously you can do it then and go give me the touchscreen. I can go make you smarter that way, hopefully. But the challenge and the adrenaline that comes with doing that teaching in real time while it's happening and being able to catch something and then get on your talk back and tell the producer, hey, I want to see this again because of this. Or even sometimes not even getting in the talk back. Just after the play-by-play guy finishes describing the play, boom, go right into it. And then the truck, hopefully they're listening to what I'm saying, and then they'll go pull up that replay and go exactly to what I was just talking about. And I'm trying to find things that make the game more interesting to the average fan and explain it in a way that's easy for them to digest without getting over their head with terminology or overwhelming them with numbers. There's a place for that too. But I think for me, it's really about making you understand why this just happened or what is about to happen or what should happen. And here's why. And finding something that hopefully maybe nobody else would. That's kind of my goal every time I do TV.
How have you balanced or adjusted going from like studio where you could have at times a full minute or minutes even to talk about something and make your point, compared to in a game where it's seconds and then sometimes you got to just lay out for the play-by-play voice?
No doubt. And that's a great point. And it's the biggest adjustment of all, for sure. I mean, even in the studio, you feel like you don't get enough time, right? Because, if you're doing a Sports Center show, for instance, they've got their show laid out so tightly, there's so much to pack in, you're going to get, a small amount of time. Go tell us what happened in that game. I always laugh, like, I'm going to basically now sit there in studio, take something that just took 2.5 hours to play out, and I am going to sum this up in 2 plays. Like, it's not the easiest thing always to do. So even then, it's not enough time. But certainly in a game, you just have to learn as you go. And I think at the beginning of the year, I think I realized I'd watch myself back. I'd always watch the games back. And I'd watch, of course, I'm watching other games all the time. And it was like, okay, I like that, don't like that. I could have been tighter there for sure. There was an opportunity to get in. I didn't take it. And you really are just critiquing yourself constantly. It's really not much different than watching yourself on film when I was a player. Yeah. I mean, the film taught me more than anything that any coach could. When you watch yourself, it's there, man. It's the reality of what you're actually doing rather than what you think you were doing in your head. Same thing with this, man. You watch yourself back. You might get done the game thinking like, oh, man, that was great. Felt great about that. Then you watch the film back, and there's a couple of things that you wish you could do again. And over time, it's really about reps. That's really all it is. I didn't have enough reps going into this season. And by the end of the year, I certainly did. And I think I found my stride about midseason.
Did you feel pressure when you first got to ESPN? Like just this week, Shane Battier had talked about being recruited by ESPN, and similarly, like they thought he was good in interviews and stuff like that as a player, but then he got there and he found that media wasn't a good fit for him. So like, did you instantly feel comfortable on TV, or did that take time?
I really felt like it came pretty naturally to me right away. I never really had anything from the beginning that I was uncomfortable with or I struggled with. It was just a matter of getting time, getting time in front of a mic, in front of a camera to just get better. And that's really what it was from the beginning. But I don't think there was anything that was going to be thrown at me that I wasn't ready for. They actually tried that in my audition. I think they were feeding questions into the analyst, to the play-by-play person or the host. And in this case, it was a studio show audition that I did. And I think they were feeding questions to the host to try to see like how good my recall was on certain things, and that was fun. That was a challenge for me, but you just get better as you go, man. That's all you can do is learn from what you're doing, watching yourself. And then I think the best way to learn is just watching other games, and things will hit you that you don't think were that great, and things will hit you that you think were outstanding, and figure out a way to incorporate it in your own style.
Did you have any coaching aspirations?
Yeah, I've had coaching aspirations along the way. And, I think the first time I really, really thought about it was after I was out of the league. I'd been at ESPN a little while, and I had 2 young kids that I was raising. And I knew that right off the bat, if I kind of pursued that, there's no telling where that would take me. I could have to go anywhere in the country. Like, if you really want to go, then you got to be all in. Who knows? And I had 2 young children that were everything to me. Being a dad was the most important thing. And they were based on the East Coast. So that kind of put it on the back burner. As they got a little bit older, and I started coaching AAU particularly with my son's team, and I got on the Under Armour circuit. So we really grew as a team. And we were, I just wanted to help these kids all play college basketball. That was my goal. But at the same time, I was laying the groundwork with like recruiting connections and getting a taste of that world and letting people see me coach. So for me, it was always a D1 level. That's what interested me. Yeah. Getting my own program, getting young men to come into your program that you recruited, that came there to play for you, that you could now impart your style, your wisdom, influence them as athletes and as young men, as students, set them up for life. Like, that really intrigued me to do that. So I did have some opportunities along the way that I pursued, didn't work out. And I've kind of put that to bed. Like, I looked at it as that was my way of teaching. I love to teach. Now my way of teaching is through this job, and I love what I'm doing, and so I don't really think about it anymore.
How is the way the NBA gets covered changed from the time that you were playing in the 90s to what it is today?
Man, I just think the biggest thing is, when I was playing, if I wanted to get critique or just listen to a review of my game, I had to hunt it out. I had to go listen to Alt Sports Radio, right? I had to watch the local news. I had to read the local columnist. That's the only place you were going to see it. So if you didn't want to hear it, you wouldn't have to. That's not the case now. I mean, obviously, with social media and with the number of platforms and the number of outlets that cover it, it's coming at you from all sides. So it's almost impossible now to block that out. I think that's the biggest thing, is the number of avenues that are breaking down what you are doing on a daily basis. I think that's the biggest change.
Did you seek that out as a player? Like, did you listen to sports radio and read stuff about you and your teams?
Yeah, I did, for sure. Yeah, I didn't shy away from it. Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. You're more likely to do that when you're on a hot streak than when you're in a slump. I'm not going to go be clicking on 980 in DC if I just had a 5-game stretch where I couldn't make a three. I'm probably going to avoid that at that point. It was funny though, when I first got to Washington in 95, I don't think a lot of people there were that familiar with me as a pro. And so I remember early in the year, I had a game one night, and I don't know. I think I played okay. It wasn't like horrible or anything, but I remember riding home from the game, and I flipped on 980, who was covering our team, and the host and the guy in the studio, they were just like questioning me being on the floor at the end of the game and like all this stuff, and I was like, wow, these guys aren't that familiar. And it was funny because obviously, like by mid-season, they could see like, okay, this dude, like I was shooting 57% from the three-point line when I went into the three-point shootout in February. So, but at some point, I think it kind of clicked, like, man, this guy could really shoot. And then I think the other thing was like, Jimmy Lynam was the head coach of that team, and he took me aside one day early in the season and was like, hey, he goes, I knew you could shoot. I didn't know that you could do as many things as you can. And you're just a winning player, and you're going to be on the court a lot at the end of games because you make great decisions. You compete. You're going to make free throws if we need that, like whatever it may be. So that kind of became my thing. Like I was on the floor a lot in the fourth quarter that year for us, but it was funny to listen to those same two guys later in the year, like, raving about me, or like maybe even saying I didn't get enough time that night. And they, early in the year, they wanted me off the floor. It was pretty funny.
What about now as an announcer? Like after you call a game, are you on social media reading comments, or do you try to stay clear of that stuff?
Not a ton. Some of it just makes its way in without you even seeking it out. Sometimes my wife will be the one to, like, if she finds something positive out there, she'll pass it on to me. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. It's flattering. You always want to get good feedback. But it's not like something that drives me one way or another. Like I'm going to try not to be too influenced by that. I feel like if I know for a fact I've prepared as well as anybody can prepare for that 2.5 hour game. And I think I'm doing a good job of making it more entertaining for people while really just educating them and just making them smarter. My whole goal is when you watch a game the next time, after you've listened to me call a game, I hope there's something you're going to watch in that game that you're going to be looking for that you didn't think was even important. Like, but now it's like, oh, wow, yeah, he was just talking about that the other day, and there it is. That's kind of my goal with the whole thing. And if I feel like I've done that as well as I can, you can't be too thin-skinned if people are going to come at you. There are just some people that are going to criticize everything, and you just kind of know that going in.
I want to talk about some of the offseason moves before we finish up. Big one today with the Milwaukee Bucks waiving Damian Lillard to make room for Miles Turner. First, how do you think Lillard feels about this? Like, should he be excited about the opportunity to get healthy and then sign with a new team next season?
I definitely think he should, because look, it all comes down to this. I mean, he's had a tough go here, right? He had the blood clot, and then he gets the torn Achilles when he comes back from that. So what a rough stretch. And I think now he sits back, he gets the buyout, he's a free agent. Who knows when we see him again, or if really, I mean, with his age, you just don't know what's going to happen to a guy when he's out that long. If he still has a driving desire to be, a high level NBA player, I mean, think about it. He could come back. He's got all his money coming to him. So you could go sign somewhere for a really team-friendly deal and pick your spot and go in and maybe be a difference maker in a team winning a title. And, that's not on his resume. So I think that's something that should excite him once the smoke clears from this injury.
You've been through this before, battling through injuries as a player. Is it harder to go through a rehab, though, without the support of a team?
There's no question about it. Yeah, that's a really difficult thing to do. I can tell you, and they've gotten a lot better with this in the NBA. When I hurt my knee, there is an isolation factor to it, even though you're on the team.
Yeah.
You're not around them the same extent. They're in the gym practicing, lifting weights, doing all that. I wasn't even at a facility that was or my rehab facility was not part of our practice facility. I was a half an hour away, 40 minutes away, where I was driving every day to a rehab clinic where you were in there with people that were also just in there from regular walks of life. I remember becoming friends with a guy on the next table that was coming back from an ACL that had an office job that tore his knee up playing in men's league. And now here we are, both getting rehabbed at the same place. So you were isolated. You weren't traveling with the team. That's the biggest part of the camaraderie and the bonding is going on those road trips. So there's an isolation factor even when you are part of a team. When you're not, I imagine, you can feel really detached from it all. And I think for a guy like Damian Lillard, ultimately, it's just keeping your eye on the big prize. If you want to come back, and that is your goal, think about what could be waiting for you at the end of this and the reward that you could have. Imagine if he goes to a team and he is a difference maker. They win a title. Who knows? And how rewarding that would be to come back from the depths of this. It's as low as it gets. Was when he planted that foot in that tour. It's as low as it gets for Damian Lillard to end up with that at the end. I think you'd learn a lot about yourself and your perseverance.
How about this this move from the Pacers standpoint? Do you think Indiana lets Turner walk in free agency if Halliburton doesn't get hurt in the finals?
Good chance they won't, but I also know that this was something they've been agonizing about for a long time, and they let it get to this point.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot, right? So I think part of it was they wanted to see what would the market dictate he was worth. And here's the other component. He didn't play well in the finals. I mean, he played good defense against Chet Holmgren. I think his physicality bothered Holmgren a little bit, and it contributed to him having a rough offensive series. But look, the main thing the guy does is he's 6'11", and he can really space the floor. He is a big-time three-point shooter with size, and he's also a great rim protector. The shooting just left him. He could not make shots. And I think it's a tough way for him to finish off his Pacers run by playing that way and shooting that way in the NBA Finals. And maybe in some ways it crystallized it all for the Pacers, what they wanted to do. And I didn't know if he was going to get that number because they were talking about everybody 27, 28, $1 million a year was his market value, mid-season.
Yeah.
When he was playing really well, he ended up getting that number. So it turns out it really didn't hurt him that much. And I think a combination of things, the Halliburton injury maybe looks like Indiana's put this on hold for a little bit. And they're going to they also have guys like Isaiah Jackson coming back, they like a lot. So, they're looking at that as well. Maybe they can just stem the tide for a year without having to pay Miles Turner all that money. And I think the Bucks looked at it like they have had a rough go here and they had to do something. So they go out and they find another spacing five-man, which is exactly what Brook Lopez was. So now they get Miles Turner. Very similar in all ways to what Brook Lopez does. So I think it made sense for the Bucks too. They had to spend that money on somebody, and freeing up the money with the Lillard buyout allowed them to do that.
Yeah, it is crazy to think that Indiana was 4 quarters away from a championship, and now they seem quite a bit further away than they have in a while. What does waiving Lillard and signing Turner, what do you think that signals for Giannis's future with Milwaukee?
It's a good question. I think it's still very much up in the air, and I think a lot of it could have to do with how they get off to a start this year. What kind of start did they have? How did they get out of the gate? It's a different team. I mean, they got rid of Chris Middleton last year. Damian Lillard is gone now. Pat Connaughton is gone. Brooke Lopez is gone. They got some of those guys back. Bobby Portis is still there. And you replace Lopez with Turner. That's a pretty good replacement for him. But a lot of the guys that Giannis Antetokounmpo was showing up and going to work with every day aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
And so you wonder how that feels to him. And when you look at the Eastern Conference, yes, there are question marks. There's no doubt. Like Boston dealing with a big one with the Tatum injury. Indiana, I just mentioned. Like these are the last two teams to represent the East in the finals. Indiana's got a lot of questions. The Knicks don't have a coach yet, but they do have a nice team, and they just added a couple of good pieces. So their depth is better. They don't know who's coaching them, so that's a pretty big question mark. Cleveland had a great year. They lost in the second round again, and they're going into the year hurt to start. So there's questions with some of these other top teams. But there's also teams that have really improved. I mean, there's no question Orlando's better, Detroit is better, Atlanta is better. So those are three teams that Milwaukee felt like they, had under control. Now those three teams could potentially catapult the Bucks. Where does that leave them? And I think a lot of it could have to do what happens with the first 2 months of the season in terms of making Giannis understand where exactly is he in terms of relevance and winning a championship.
It seems like every single year there are rumblings that LeBron might leave the Lakers, and then every year he stays. Is this year different potentially?
I think so, but I mean, at the same time, I always felt like LeBron went to LA for reasons more than basketball.
Yeah.
It wasn't just playing for the Lakers. Yeah, that mattered. The brand mattered. It's an organization committed to winning. He wanted that. He wanted to, have his legacy be part of the Lakers' history. He's done all of those things. But there was other stuff. I think he likes the market. He likes living there. He likes there's opportunities out there. I think his family likes it there. So I don't know that I ever bought into the fact that he might be leaving. And I thought the wordage around his signing was interesting. Like he opted in for the first time. But as soon as he did it, like the language was, he's really hoping they're committed to doing everything they can to win a championship. All right, I'm not exactly sure what that means. Most guys will opt in because they think that's the best chance to win a championship. In a guy of his stature, it sounded a little bit different to me. Maybe in some ways, it's like what I said about Giannis. Maybe LeBron is also going to sit and wait. I just think, now turning 41 this year, what would you have to give up if you're a contender to go after LeBron James? You'd almost have to gut your team of young assets. Would that leave you enough to still contend? So there's a lot of question marks, I think, around LeBron. And I think a lot of it's going to be solved by what Luka looks like at the start of the year, what kind of chemistry they have, and what chance that gives LeBron James to compete and contend again this year.
So does it seem like LeBron's top priority at this point, whether he has 1 year left or 2 years, is his top priority winning a championship, or is his top priority finishing out his career in Los Angeles?
That's a great question. I mean, he's saying it's winning. But at the same time, I mean, look, he's won a lot. He's been to 10 finals. He's won 4. I think he also understands the circumstances. I think right now there's a little bit of each of those things pulling at him. Yeah, of course, who wouldn't want to go out as a winner and a guy that's won as much as LeBron James has? You don't want to finish this off on like a first-round elimination 2 years in a row with the Lakers, and that's the end of your run. So I definitely think that's there. But at what cost to him and his family, and taking a chance on a different organization? And where would that organization be if they give up the assets it's going to take to get him? So it's not an easy situation. I think personally, I feel like his heart is in LA, and I think he's going to finish his career in LA.
Would the Knicks be a better team with a 41-year-old LeBron James or a 30-year-old Karl Anthony Towns?
A 41-year-old LeBron James, I'd say.
Yeah.
I still think LeBron has the ability to dominate games. And the great thing about LeBron is he can beat you in another way. He can beat you as a primary facilitator for long stretches of games. And you talk about, spoon feeding you shots. That's what some of those shooters on the Knicks need. They need a little bit more time. They're not pure shooters. Like, he's a guy that can get you the ball a half a count sooner. It's more accurate. There's more velocity on it when it comes to you. So as a shooter, that extra half a second or whatever it is matters a lot. It's a big difference when you're not a pure shooter between a semi-contested shot, uncontested shot, or contested shot. LeBron James solves a lot of that for you, and it makes those shots all higher percentage shots. So like the fact that he can go an entire quarter, take 1 or 2 shots and be the best player on the floor some nights, that is a rare quality. So that's not even a knock of Karl Anthony Towns. It's just how special LeBron is. Should
the Knicks have been more interested in Kevin Durant?
Yeah, I think so. I think Kevin Durant is still the answer for a lot of different situations. And I think I'm really excited about what Houston has done in acquiring him. They checked off that box that they did not have, a solution offensively for anything that's in front of you defensively. Kevin Durant represents that. And he's got great infrastructure around him with the defensive team. They've got great size. They went out and they added more guys, so they've got a lot of depth, well-coached, tough group, an emerging star next to him and Amen Thompson, a really good player in Şengün. So, I mean, Houston, they did what they had to secure him. They might have absolutely solidified themselves as the second best team in the Western Conference. And yes, I think Kevin Durant could have been a difference maker for a team like the Knicks as well.
The Thunder just signed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to a record contract extension today. Are they set up for a potential dynasty?
Yeah, I think one thing that's different about them than some of the other recent winners we've had, because it comes up all the time, like how far can they take this? As soon as a team wins it for the first time, particularly, you start going there. Look at the age, look at the contract situation. Is this something they can continue to do? And I think in a lot of cases we say yes, knowing that there are things that are going to get in the way. Number one, just it's impossible to keep everybody. 2, egos get in the way. Injuries get in the way. Like all of those things. I look at Oklahoma City, I think maybe they are going to be an exception because they have an egoless group. It starts with that. Everybody understands the hierarchy on their team. And I think Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are the perfect 2 and 3 to ride alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I just don't see that ever becoming a problem. They buy into who they are and the way they play off of each other. Chet Holmgren especially fully understands. Like being in that spot is a really healthy thing. If you slide over even 1 seat and you become the number 2 on a team, your responsibilities and expectations of consistency to produce big numbers every night is dramatically different. In the 3rd seat, you could have nights where you score 6 or 8 points. If you rebound and defend, people are going to laud you for your performance because you're probably going to win and you had something to do with it. If you're the 2nd option, that changes. Now, no, we kind of need 20 tonight. And, can you do that every night? So I think their minds have wrapped around that and they buy in. And Mark Daigneault has created an incredible culture there of unselfishness. And so that's why I think the age, the personality types, and getting those top 3 guys locked up, which they will. Chet's is going to be right behind Shai's this extension. Or I'm sorry, Jalen Williams and Chet are going to be locked up soon too. I think you're going to be able to run this back for a while.
Last thing, who are you more excited to watch over the next 10 years? Cooper Flagg or Victor Wembanyama?
Oh, man, why are you going to hit me like that? That's an impossible one. Man, I'm going to say Wembanyama.
Okay.
Because you're talking about an absolute potential one of one historically, right? And he's already shown glimpses of that. He's got more to add. He's definitely got to add more just functional strength to play through some certain things with the ball. I mean, it looks like he's still growing. I watch videos of him all the time, and you see still pictures of the guy, and you're like, is this guy 8 feet tall now? What is happening with this guy? So for me, the uniqueness of that size with that skill set and the way he impacts both ends, probably him. But I'll say this about Cooper Flagg. I think I saw him for the first time when he was 15, and I was convinced then this guy is a can't-miss star, maybe superstar quickly because of his edge and his toughness and his competitiveness. That alone is going to help Dallas immediately. The dude loves to play, and he loves to compete, and he loves playing defense. The other stuff will come. First of all, he's a better passer than anybody realizes. When people get a look at this guy in an NBA game with that kind of spacing, the passes he's capable of making, I think there was one thing that he's got to tighten up. He's got a little bit of a funky release on his shot. So mechanically, extending that out to 24 feet comfortably will be an interesting thing to watch. But the athletic ability, the toughness, the vision, the IQ, all of that stuff spells can't miss superstar.
Tim, you were great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Brandon. Thanks.
Of course, that is Tim Legler. You can see him on ESPN and listen to him on the All NBA podcast. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.